Hello, is it on? Hello, Justin Fish with the Planning Department. We have a special use application for the development of an electric substation. The proposed development area of 2.75 acres is located on the northeast corner of the 98.3 acre parcel. The parcel is located north of East Etowah Road along 72nd Avenue Southeast. Here is a map of the existing zoning. Everything in this surrounding area is zoned A2, with the exception of one parcel to the south that is zoned A1, general agricultural. Here is a map of the existing land uses, some of the structures located within the area, and orientation to the subject tract. This is an aerial shot of where the proposed development site is located. This is a photo taken on 72nd Avenue looking north, looking south on 72nd, looking east on 72nd, and looking west on 72nd. This is the proposed site plan for the substation. And we have a protest map with 59.4% having filled a protest for the development. It can be seen on the map. The applicant has prepared a presentation. Staff is also available for questions, and the applicant also has representatives for questions as well.
Thank you. Moving to commission questions for staff. I have a few questions on this. Is the City of Norman a joined applicant for this project, or is it only the utility company and the fee simple landowner?
Just the utility company.
Okay, thank you. Could you speak to when one of the last substations that were installed in Norman, or do you have some other examples of substations that maybe you could refer to?
We had one from, I believe it was, I'm having trouble remembering the name, NextEra, I believe. It was located on Franklin and 48th Avenue, I believe. And there was one, I forget the street names, but I believe it was on Boyd and, sorry, I can't remember the other name.
So we did have one on Boyd and 24th West several years ago, but it was an existing site. And it was, they came forward with some changes after we had amended the zoning code to require this special use. So actually, it's next to the fire station. I'm sure many of you have seen it. But we required them to come forward and get special use on that site to bring it current. So it was actually existing for many, many years. But the one that Justin was talking about out on Franklin was the most recent.
Do you know approximately when that was?
I have it right here.
Like year or two, maybe?
It's been in the last year.
Yeah.
It was 22, 23,
Okay.
September.
Could we pull up the site map again, please? Just to orient us on there, is this a north-facing map, or which way is our cardinal directions?
North should be up.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
70 seconds to the left or right.
Thank you. And would you mind going to the aerial map view of the site map? Like the location map. Yeah, maybe the parcel, the one maybe before this. That one. So the lines that would tie into this potentially would be going in this way, east and west, across the sites to the sides of this. Is that correct? Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. And this might be a question that we could wait until after the application, the applicant presentation, but if from a city perspective, if I could have any insight as to the necessity for the substation for citizens of Norman, maybe from Public Works on there, and also the intended use of this, who's going to benefit from that substation, if it will be serving citizens of Norman or Noble or surrounding communities?
I feel it's best if the applicant answers those questions.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the city? Okay, seeing none, I'd take the applicant presentation.
Hello, everybody. My name is Joe Crodell. I'm here representing Western Farmers Electric Co-op. Like you heard, we're here requesting a special use to operate an electric substation. And as you've seen, let me click through here. This property is located right off of 72nd. There are existing Western Farmers power lines that run east and west that this substation, if built, will tie into. This site was chosen specifically to tie into those existing lines, so new lines. They don't anticipate bringing on new lines, and especially do not anticipate bringing on any higher capacity lines. They will remain the same if they're added onto. But this site was really selected for numerous reasons. It's located between two existing substations on the east and west side, so it will create a connectivity that can tie into this existing lines and bolster the capacity in this area. This is a very low density area, so that is a positive for Western Farmers. As mentioned, there are some substations around Norman, like on 36th and Robinson, that Western Farmers operates, that is in a extremely densely populated area of Norman, much more so than here. 24th and Boyd, similar station. That is not a Western Farmers property, but it's also in a very developed area. And this was selected for its location off 72nd Street as well. I mean, it's a decently, it's a traveled road. It's easy for them to get in and out of. There were some, the site was selected so it can accommodate the growing electrical demands in the area. I mean, Norman 2025, just to the west, is targeted that area as a growth area. They need more electrical power in this area, and it is designed to provide power, to your question, to Norman residents. A general construction timeline would be about 60 days from ground break to completion. They anticipate, if everything goes smoothly and they can continue on, that this would be completed towards the end of 2025. I'll address, there's a lot of surrounding landowners that have submitted protests, and I'll address some of their concerns just ahead of time. One of them was traffic. Western Farmers, if the substation site is operating as it should, which they have every anticipation that it will, then 1 car per month will come in and out of this site. So there, as you'll see in the staff report, there is a very negligible traffic impact. Noise was another common concern. I've spoken with some of the Western Farmers people, and there's a federal regulation that mandates that any substation not emit more than 75 decibels. And I had to ask, and 75 decibels is comparable to a washing machine. So, with the closest adjacent landowner being 100 and some change away from this proposed site, any noise impact would be pretty much zero. A lot of the concerns have also surrounded drainage. Western Farmers, and if you'll go back to the site plan here, it's difficult to see, but on the right side, kind of towards the top half, there's a circle that will it's hard to see on here from, maybe from where y'all are sitting, but that is the drainage detention area. They are, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but they are constructing a drainage pond to divert, where all the water diverted off of this will go, and it will flow east away from the substation and also away from the closest adjoining property owner. The site will be gravel, and around it, the remaining, or the existing vegetation will remain. They are planning to have a fence surrounding this site, and in the past, Western Farmers has done some, they're limited in what they can, in the vegetation that they can keep, but they don't anticipate removing any existing vegetation that's there. I know there are some trees along the northern property boundary separating the adjoining property owner's home from this proposed site. But back to, there's also been some concerns raised about health concerns, and really those have scientifically been unfounded. There are no scientific studies that Western Farmers is aware of that suggest that there are any health concerns that are inherent in somebody living near one of these types of substations. I think that's evident by the fact that there are numerous other similar substations in Norman in much higher density areas, and they have also not received any noise complaints from those other sites as well. So I kind of wanted to get ahead a little bit on maybe what you might hear in a moment, but if there's anything that you guys would like to ask of me, I'm here. And I have a team of Western Farmers people as well. If I can't answer it, then they should be able to.
I have a question, actually.
Yes, sir.
You said that the family that is closest is 100 or so
Yes, sir.
feet, yards, miles?
100 feet. I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear.
Okay.
That would be directly north, so on the top part of that
Okay.
site map.
Then the second thing is, have y'all thought about that if this passes and is allowed to be built, of putting some type of noise barriers to go along with even more, as opposed to and including the aesthetic part of it, of maybe putting trees around this fence that you talked about? And
As for barriers, Western Farmers in the past has put barriers around the chain link fence that they will be constructing to block visibility in from, just being on the outside of that fence. They've done that in the past. As for vegetation, adding vegetation, there are strict regulations on where vegetation can be added. I'm told that no existing vegetation will need to be removed, but adding vegetation is very unlikely due to federal regulations as to, you can't have trees grown into power lines and that sort of thing.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you referred to the Norman future plan. Are there any immediate needs that you see or have been notified of?
Immediate needs for electricity demands?
Yes.
I mean, yes, that's why they've selected this site, is this area of Norman and the surrounding communities is growing, and so there has been there's been a large project that was referenced before, the NextEra project. The electricity grid is undersupplied generally in the area, and so that's why this was selected as a site, and for mainly convenience into tapping into that existing line.
And would that be serving Norman or Norman heavy emphasis on neighboring?
It would be, that might be a better question for one of Western Farmers engineers potentially, or?
My name's Travis Couch, I'm the manager of transmission and distribution engineering at Western Farmers. Since this substation is very close to Norman City, the southern Norman city limits, it's kind of hard to tell exactly who it's going to be serving. But to your question about immediate needs, so the other two substations he referenced earlier, those are quickly approaching their capacity. So if we don't build this new substation, we won't have the capacity just to serve existing load, much more future load. But it will definitely serve citizens of Norman and surrounding areas. I don't have an answer on how many.
Okay, and the existing ones, do you have any data on stray voltage on those substations nearby? Like on a regular basis, what extent you experience stray voltage?
And to what extent of stray voltage? Can you?
The reason why I'm asking is I believe there's a number of citizens here whose concern is the agricultural nature of the land. And if there is the potential for stray voltage, then there is the potential for negative impact on livestock. And so my best ability to ask a question about stray voltage on a hypothetical, because you're asking for approval, substation, is to ask you in what regard you have data on stray voltage at the other substations and how you've mitigated it.
So we don't have any data on stray voltage at other substations, but we will design this substation with a ground grid to prevent stray voltage from leaving the property. And I would say Western Farmers is predominantly in highly agricultural areas. I mean, we have, most of our substations, I would say, are surrounded by cattle operations, and we have no complaints on, voltages affecting cattle.
Thank you.
I did want to add just a comment that Ms. Hudson also pointed out that the Destin Landing project that we may be familiar with is to the south here too. So that may be one of those, west of here, one of the projects in question that has changed and added to density.
I had a question about, and this may be a question for one of the representatives of the co-op. How far west does the service area for the co-op go before you get into OG&E service area or
OEC.
Or OEC, correct, yeah. And that kind of relates to my second question is we're talking about all this anticipated growth. I'm curious what the service area is because there are limitations on growth within the Norman 2025 plan and what's being discussed with the future comp plan as well for growth to the east. And so there are already limitations. I'm just curious how that service area affects the growth we're anticipating.
So OEC is a member of Western Farmers. They're a member owner of Western Farmers. I don't know where their service territory is compared with OG&E. Western Farmers, we don't really have a defined service territory. We provide the transmission service, whereas OEC provides the distribution service. OG&E, on the other hand, they do both. So it's a little bit of a little distinction there. But Western Farmers, we cover pretty much 3/4 of the state of Oklahoma, other than the northeast up by Tulsa.
So I'm curious whether it's one of the two of you or anyone, if we know where the cutoff between OG&E and OEC service area is relative to this site that we're talking about to the west. I'm just thinking about future capacity, what needs are, with what we're talking about as anticipated growth.
I do not know where their service territory is.
Generally, I'll say that OEC, I don't know this for a fact. Some of the residents might be able to answer, but I would imagine that they are OEC customers. Just based on what I know about, where OEC people are and OG&E people are. OG&E, okay. But it's not. So yeah, that, it doesn't, Western Farmers is the transmitter rather than the provider, I guess you could say.
Could you talk a little bit about, in the protest area, it shows the owner of the property that you're planning to put this on as someone who's protesting. Can you walk through that a little bit? for me,
Yeah,
please?
so Western Farmers has acquired the 2.75 acre parcel through a condemnation action. That condemnation action is not complete. However, the way those actions work is a site is identified, a governing entity or a public utility has shown the court enough that they have authority to take that land through condemnation. Commissioners are appointed by a judge, and those commissioners assign a value. Once the condemning authority or the utility in this instance pays that value into the court, they have legal title to that land. So the Horsches, who own the 98 to 100 acre parcel, large parcel, I'll show you there. So that is their entire parcel that they own. The Western Farmers taking is in the very top right corner. It's the approximately 370 feet from the farthest right boundary in the north corner to the to the west a little bit, and then it makes a square. So it's hard to see on that one, but that blue square.
We have it on our.
Okay.
I just wanted to get a better understanding.
Yeah, so that's why that is, if that helps. From an eminent domain action, yes, sir.
No, we'll actually come to that in a separate section. Thank you. I think, did you have a comment too? Just you have to unmute.
I had basically a technical question. I know I've seen substation areas that only had like 2 or 3 transformers, but they had a lot of space around them for potential growth. Will this area be filled with transformers, or will it start out with 2 or 3 and then added as need demands?
It will be one transformer. The additional land around there is twofold. One for the detention pond you saw, and two, if the transformer were to fail in the future, we don't anticipate failing, obviously, but we have to have room to get all of our equipment in there to replace it. But we don't anticipate growing larger than one transformer.
I have a follow-up question to that. Is 2.75 acres in line with other transformer sites, or is that maybe a little bit larger than some single transformer sites?
So our standard is a 300 by 300 site, which would be right at 2 acres. We did expand this a little bit farther east to west in anticipation of Norman ever widening 72nd Street. Not sure if that's in y'all's plans, but we just kind of think in the future.
Do you know if this falls on a section line?
I do not.
Can you speak a little bit about the process of where you are with the condemnation action? And I bring this up for point of reference because we have had some examples of other planning commission items where we have made motions, for example, that were subject to, a recommendation was subject to having actual agreements in place or having actual ownership in place prior to approval at city council. So that would be a concern that I have, is this preemptive? I certainly understand the need to keep processes moving forward as other processes are happening, but I wouldn't feel comfortable, I think, putting a recommendation that this property be rezoned before the applicant has actual ownership in title.
So like I said, under Oklahoma law, when a condemning authority or such as a public utility pays into the court that commissioner's award, that starts, it does three things, really. It gives the authority title to the land. It, two, starts a clock for the landowner to contest two things. One, the value, and two, the ability of that condemning authority to take the land. The Horsches have filed both, so they are contesting the value and the ability to take. My law firm and myself are not representing Western Farmers in that action. It is, I will say anecdotally, it is very common for landowners who are having land condemned to contest the value. It is less common to contest the ability of the public utility to take. You are welcome to read the briefings that the council handling the condemnation has provided. I won't, this isn't necessarily the forum to give my opinion on those briefings, but it is very uncommon for a public utility to be deemed unable to take land in this kind of instance. Oklahoma law has regularly found that utilities such as Western Farmers have the right to condemn land through their right as a public utility in the state statute and constitutional language, state constitutional language, I believe, to that effect. So I will not make any predictions as to what that outcome will be, but I will say that at this time, Western Farmers does have the authority to do this.
Thank you. And are those actions done through district court or Supreme Court for the state?
It's in the District Court of Cleveland County right now.
And are there appeals processes of which these would be eligible for potentially after that
Yes,
taking?
That might be a better question for Mr. Fulkerson because he is handling the condemnation action for the Horsches, but yes, you can appeal.
Okay. So just theoretically, let's say the condemnation did proceed through, then the fee simple owner that lost their land could then appeal, potentially taking a few more years. In the meantime, the utility company could have already built a substation before the expiration of the full judicial process that the fee simple owner is allowed through those statutes, thus maybe affecting their case?
I would, if theoretically, yes, that could happen. If that was not clearly established in a final order that is not any further appealable, that Western Farmers does not have the ability to take. So I guess if the court were to rule that Western Farmers had the ability to take, they filed an appeal. This is getting into legal advice, but I don't know if I would recommend them breaking ground until that's finalized. But that is just, theoretically, yes, they could break ground, and whether that's prudent or not is a different discussion because of those issues that you're raising.
Thank you. And thank you for asserting what was not your legal opinion in that too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you tell me what the current deadline for the initial process is, not including appeal? Like, what is the current cutoff time frame?
That's a question for Mr. Fulkerson that he can address in his time. I'm not involved in that. I know there's filings on file. I don't know, there's no scheduling order in place or a trial date set. From my understanding, they're in negotiations with the landowner, primarily as to just compensation value. That's just my understanding. But no, there is no current schedule on place for that.
If it would be amicable to the commission, I think because we have questions regarding the case and somebody here who could answer those questions, I would be willing to allow Mr. Fulkerson to come up to answer our questions with the understanding that this is not for the comment period, but solely to answer the questions that the commission has. Would you be comfortable with us addressing
I'd be agreeable
those?
if the questions are limited to the condemnation action.
Great, thank you. I understand that. Thank you very much.
Do we, point of order, do we need a motion on that to pass?
No, I do not think so. Thank you. Okay, so just answering the first questions, I think we want to know deadlines. What are your hearing dates? And can you give us, knowing that scheduling orders can change, some approximate dates and timeframes of when Condemnation Act could go through to start with?
I appreciate, my name is Sean Fulkerson. I'm an attorney from South Oklahoma City, and I represent the property owners. And I want to appreciate you guys here today, but the current status of the case in district court is there is no scheduling order. So there are no deadlines, no time periods, no mediation, nothing is set. We have filed exceptions in the case to the take for public use, and we have contested the valuation of the commissioners in this case.
Approximately how long from your experience would it take to have a hearing set from this point?
Typically, it's a 180-day process that the scheduling order would be entered, and that would not give you a trial date. That would give you a pretrial conference date 180 days out. But to your question before, as far as the special use permit, this is our best chance. to
We're
start.
going to go ahead and stop
Just
you
on the
there.
condemnation.
So
Well,
as
that's
a
that's in regard to the
Thank you very much.
condemnation.
As a point of order, we're allowing some extra time, and please stay at the microphone. We'll ask you some questions about the
Sure.
condemnation, and then we will allow you time to visit in the public comment section. Is there discovery involved in these kinds of condemnation cases that would affect some of these hearing dates after the pretrial conference?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
There will be rounds of interrogatories, requests for productions. There will be designation of experts for evaluation purposes. MAI appraisers will be involved. And we anticipate having an expert as to the need, the public need of this facility.
If we were to give it a ballpark without holding you to a strict deadline, about how long do you think it will take for the actual final order to hit for this condemnation? I mean, are we talking about a 1-year process? Are we talking about a 6-month process or a 2-year process?
I anticipate that this case will go to trial. And so I'm going to give you a 1 year. I think that would be reasonable. Because once you get to pretrial, 180 days out, in Cleveland County, they have very busy dockets. So for you to get a jury in Cleveland County, you're probably looking at a year.
Okay. And assuming there was an unfavorable result for your party, if there was an appeal, what would the appellate court process be? How much time? Are we talking about another 6 months, another year? Just ballparking on your experience with this district court.
So if there was a final judgment from a jury verdict, you're looking at probably 18 months to probably 28 months on appeal to the Court of Appeals. And then there would be an additional appeal to the Supreme Court possible. They would have to accept cert on that to do that, but that would be about another year process too. So everything told, maybe if it goes the full, legal actions don't happen quickly, everyone knows that, but yeah, I would say 3 years from today would be the full length of this.
For the appellate. Okay, so I'm just going to reread those dates, and then if there are any other questions by commission regarding the condemnation case, if we could please get those questions brought forward from commission. So we are saying approximately 1 year for this trial to be completed and for the property to potentially be awarded. And, you know, we won't make any guess on that, but the understanding that that could be awarded to the utility company or not. After that, should the utility company not win that, or should they lose that case, I would assume the utility company would also appeal. So then your appeal process may be taking about another 18 to 28 months. So were those accurate representations? Okay. Any other questions regarding the condemnation process or case? Thank you very much. Okay. Are there any other questions by commission for the applicant?
Yes, I know they said it was approximately halfway. But were there any conversations with any other property owners that are approximately halfway made? Or was a decision made, an action to proceed with condemnation occurring without conversation?
So in January, I'll get you the exact date, January 17th of this year, the Western Farmers Board authorized Western Farmers to pursue site selection. As for other locations, Travis has some information on that.
Okay, so on the site selection, then, in the process of site selection specifically, were any property owners approached versus a decision made and a condemnation order proceeded?
Sorry to jump in. Before a condemnation action is filed, public utilities and condemning authorities are required by law to engage in good faith negotiation to reach an agreement as to a purchase price before anything is filed, and Western Farmers did that.
With
So
one individual or multiple
at least
homeowners?
At least with the horses. I don't know about additional individuals, but
So we looked at probably 6 to 8 properties altogether, and we contacted probably half of the landowners. I do believe we made an offer, maybe on one. We have contacted others, yes.
Okay, so others declined and you moved on?
It was a mutually, it's a conversation between us and OEC on the location, and the other locations didn't work out for OEC.
But you had willing owners?
No, we had nobody accepted our offer.
Okay.
this was the most suitable site for.
So because nobody accepted an offer, a decision was made.
And just as a point of order, we'll wait for public comment. Thank you.
And so you proceeded through legal action to take the land. Am I understand that correctly? Not that that's not, I'm acknowledging that as a legal avenue, that you've done things legally, but I just want to make sure I understand that everybody said no, and so you chose what you felt was the best site and proceeded with a condemnation avenue. Okay.
That's the best way to start, yes.
Okay, all right. Just so I understand, like, how much legwork was on the backside of moving forward. Okay.
I have a question about if the condemnation process is successful and the taking occurs, is there a requirement to rezone? Or is that something that there, supersedes rezoning and that you can move forward regardless?
No, the land use is the land use, and so the condemnation is acquiring fee simple title to that property to operate the substation, that's why we're here. is
Sure.
For the special use permit.
Okay, that's what I assumed. I just wanted to
Yeah.
just make sure. And related to that, just knowing the timeline or hearing the timeline of the condemnation process, I guess my question is why the rezoning right now? What's the rush with this?
Western Farmers has the ability to do it at this time, and we want to be prepared to serve our customers and to continue with the project in the hopes, one, of resolving the condemnation. I'd like to point out that, trials are never inevitable. Settlements and negotiation will continue until the day of. I'm not involved in those, but we want to be prepared when the moment is, when we can, as early as possible, to break ground and to build this substation. So that's, I hope that answers your question.
I have a follow-up to that.
Yes.
So theoretically, if there was approval for the rezoning, are you saying that like the next day after a settlement was reached, you would be out there? Or would it be 3 weeks to 5 weeks?
If a final settlement is reached and a final settlement agreement is reached between the Horseshoes and Western Farmers, which again, I'm not privy to those negotiations, then yes, if the zoning is clear, and everything is resolved with the condemnation, then as soon as possible, again, because a settlement would resolve that condemnation case outside or prior to a trial. So yes, as soon as possible, I would imagine.
Could I ask City Attorney Beth Muckala to possibly answer that question for us as well, from a city perspective of after the zoning were if the zoning were passed by both Planning Commission and City Council, if for permitting purposes, they would be able to begin construction according to City of Norman rules?
I would caveat my answer with, if everything is permitted and everything like that is done, and that was the last thing would be to resolve the condemnation, then yes. If there were other steps to be taken, I know there are state permits that need to be obtained and federal regulation permits, I would imagine, that need to be obtained. So with the caveat that that is the absolute last thing that needs to be done, then yes, if we would start as soon as possible. But
Thank you.
Just to be sure, would you repeat the question?
Yes, so if the zoning was approved through both Planning Commission and City Council, the zoning as proposed was approved, would the applicant be able to begin construction and pretty much immediately upon begin permitting and begin construction prior to the condemnation being complete?
I will second what Mr. Cordell said about they're going to have other requirements. They're going to have other things that don't involve the City of Norman at all. But as far as whether they get to do the project, that's not the City of Norman's call. If we grant zoning, it doesn't mean they get to do the project. If we don't grant it, that we don't make the decision about whether that taking is necessary.
Right.
Or about whether they engaged in good faith negotiations or anything like that. That's handled in the district court. And as far as if there's anything in that case that would keep us from examining this question tonight, no. If there were an issue, that would be something handled in that court. And they would, of course, let us know that that's outside the bounds. So no, there's nothing they need from us other than to examine the zoning question.
Yes, and I think for a point of order, it's not a bad time to point out that we are not ruling on the condemnation. We are looking at a zoning request. Our interest in the condemnation is really in understanding what our applicant's situation is with this property and the rights they have at this moment and going forward. But it sounds, just clarifying, could they, if they were approved through the zoning action, could they then apply for a City of Norman permit to build this or whatever they would need to by City of Norman standards only outside of any other regulatory?
If that's what they need, yes, because the status of the litigation is such. And this is, the City of Norman does eminent domain too, so we're very familiar with this process. Once you have the commissioner's award and that money has been deposited in the court, Oklahoma statute says you get to move forward with your project. So yes, their aspect of moving forward with their project, they are allowed to do. Whether there is a risk that that could be overturned and they have to undo that, I suppose that's their evaluation.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. Are there any other questions by commission for?
Actually, yes, before
Yeah.
our city attorney, yes.
Yes.
So historically, as other public utilities have gone through the eminent domain process to take land from a private landowner, has there ever been a successful homeowner to deny having this happen? Or in your experience with the City of Norman, has anyone ever successfully fought being able to take a piece of land through eminent domain for a public utility?
I've been here 6 years. It hasn't happened in those 6 years. I'm not aware of an immediate history, whether there's a historical case out in there.
That's all.
And you said
thank
utility owners, if you're speaking about a company that, other than, the Norman Utilities Authority, that's not something I would have immediate knowledge of. And of course, there are lots of those NextEra cases out there still pending.
Yes, okay, thank you.
And I have a follow-up question as well.
You have one more?
Sorry. So I understand the answer that you gave to the initial questions. I guess my question is really more for the appropriateness of the timing of like being on this agenda versus a future agenda. If we grant it and the planning, the rezoning, and it moves forward to city council and they approve, Norman is not going to police whether they proceed, right? So if we've checked off on these, then we'll automatically, they would be approved in permitting because they were checked off in these. So the appropriateness, I guess, is what I was getting at on whether or not there's ever been a successful case or appeal or denial or whatever. Maybe if we're viewing it this early in the game, does that lend towards it being unlikely that a homeowner's case is given fair shake?
I guess the issue I'm having, and the trouble I have in answering that question, is that what we're evaluating tonight is the appropriateness of the use, not the appropriateness of the timing of asking for the use.
Okay.
Which
Fair.
the appropriateness of the use is what's in our purview tonight. Their rights as to the private landowners are what's being litigated in that case. And whether or not we grant that zoning use, I'd be shocked if it weighed into it. That's the court's decision, but I
Right.
would be.
Okay. Thank you.
I just want to thank all three attorneys that have spoken with us tonight and being so willing to help us understand these processes, since in my experience on commission, this is the first time we've dealt with a property under condemnation. So thank you for everybody being willing to help us understand, and specifically for the applicant and their representative for being willing to share this time for us to have that understanding.
Just one last thing, Beth really hit it on the nail on the head right there, is that you're evaluating whether this specific use is appropriate or not. The condemnation is a completely separate action, has completely separate considerations of value and the ability of a utility owner to take land to operate their utility. Your job is specifically to assess whether a special permit in an A2 is appropriate under the circumstances of what we have proposed will be there and are asking to use this land for. So if you don't have any other questions, I will let the others have their time.
Any other questions by commission for the applicant? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move to public comment. I do have Trey Kirby as our first public comment. Just as a reminder, if you will please come up to the microphone, state your name and address. If you will have 3 minutes to speak. If you would like a 30-second warning before your time is up, let me know. Otherwise, I'll yield the full time to you. At the end of the 3 minutes, I'll thank you for your comments.
Thank you. I'm Trey Kirby. I live in Ward 5, 311 Rose Rock Drive. I appreciate all y'all being here and taking the time to even hear us out. I mean, it's a hard job. As he was saying, they have a right to it. That is incorrect. He does not own it yet. To ask y'all to rezone it, he should have really waited till he owned it, whether it be through eminent domain or not. They should have asked permission. They are stepping into our neighborhood. I don't own the land, but my pawpaw ran cattle on it the whole time he was alive till the day he died. I have memories on there. They keep saying prices. How do you put a price on a memory, especially a loved one that's gone? My great Uncle Donnie still runs cattle on it today. My dad and great Uncle Donnie just today hauled 6 cattle off of it. He keeps saying they're not taking vegetation. You're taking 2.5 acres of vegetation. He keeps saying there's no environmental risk. Have they done environmental studies? Can we see the environmental studies? As far as the voltage, I built skyscrapers when I lived in Texas. I was an engineer. We did the Ray Hunt project. One of the things we did was put in a huge grounding system. They did the same thing by the Moore Norman Votech. when the Moore Norman Votech expanded with that awesome expansion they did, they had to take into effect that substation because of the amount of electricity that could go through that ground. I am a licensed electrician. I work for a marijuana grow. It's a 1,200 amp system, so I know a little bit about the higher voltage. They're saying a lot of stuff that they don't have no proof for it. But one thing is like she said, they do use eminent domain. Eminent domain in Norman, by the city of Norman, made me mad enough that I'm running for Norman City 5 Ward Council because of a bridge that was using eminent domain and land was taken from a farmer. These people are guests into our town. They could treat these residents as guests because these residents have been here a lot longer than they have. Like they said, if you go back to the whole portion, I don't know how to do it. Somewhere in there was a whole portion. And in that portion, it said nobody else accepted offers. But then he said someone did, but OEC didn't like the location. So now we have two businesses deciding what multiple generations of farmers get to do with property that their family bought and acquired legally and under the law. He said that they are not involved with the city of Norman. If this was involved with the city of Norman, eminent domain would be necessary and would be okay because that's how the Constitution is wrote. It's not wrote that private companies can just come in and take private property. Once again, what he calls an acceptable offer, you can't replace them memories. He don't know what an offer is. It might be acceptable to them, but to them, it obviously ain't because they didn't accept it. Y'all have a good day, and I really do appreciate y'all. I'm sorry if I'm not angry, it's just passion.
Thank you very much for your comments. I have J.D. Cromer next. Just again, come up to the microphone and state your name and address, please. Let me know if you'd like the warning. Okay.
I'm J.D. Cromer. I live at 72nd Cemetery Road, and I'm here on behalf of Mr. Stan Ward's estate. Western Farmers, you tried to get Mr. Ward's land at one time to build it over there. Is that correct? From that person who said you made some contacts?
As a point of order, comments should be directed to
I want to
us.
make sure the person that said that the contacts, okay? Well, Mr. Ward, I can't say this right now, what Mr. Ward told him about the idea of building on his land, okay? I'm gonna be nice about it. The voltage and everything is 69 kV. My father worked for OG&E for 33 years. You're building this thing on a federal land deal waterway that feeds Lake Thunderbird, which just came from a meeting from OTA, which we're fighting the land across the road for the future turnpike. Okay? There's so many other things that fall, the flooding. I've got 8-foot tin horns across the road and they've been washed out. The flood water over there is amazing what comes off that hill because Mr. Ward has a bunch of ponds on his place. I think they've been notified on 60th to build a substation, but never got back to the landowner of a price. There's so much going on of this whole deal with the turnpike, the widening of 72nd, and there's no reason for a substation out there. As Noble's building 600 homes, but if OEC would have properly built their lines that they put in with all the money they got with fiber and upgraded to a bigger size wattage, because of all the marijuana farms down in Noble, they wouldn't have this shortage of power. Now they're looking for it because, well, East Norman's supposed to grow. It ain't East Norman ain't growing, it's Noble. There's gonna be 600 houses that's right on 60th and Post Oak Road. So I think somebody needs to look closer to the purpose of building closer to the additions going in instead of going out in the country where we like our animals and stuff to run freely without the people of being
30 seconds.
told what to do as Mr. Stanward, and I can't repeat it, I'll say the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Moving to Sean Fulkerson. Would you like a 30-second warning?
Please.
And just a reminder to state your name and address, please.
Sure. My name is Sean Fulkerson. I'm the attorney for the Horses. Would y'all please stand up? This is Orville Horse, John Horse, his daughter, and his son-in-law. They've owned this property since
Would you
Jimmy
state your address for the record, please?
What?
Will you state your address for the record, please?
Okay.
You can use your business address.
Sure. 10444 Greenbrier Place, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, 73159.
Thank you.
The Horses have owned this property since Jimmy Carter was president. That's what Mr. Horse used to say. He's 93 years old. This is their family retreat. It's 100 acres. They run cattle on it. There's deer on it. They are very, very opposed to this. One of the reasons they own this property is to be free from uses like this. This is a special use permit. It is not to be granted without fair consideration. I have learned more in 30 minutes sitting here listening to council than I did at the pre-development meeting. Number one, they were late. Number two, they had none of these documents. Here's what we got, folks. For this project, we got a boundary survey. And I'm involved on the other side with the condemnation case. No plans, no height, no buffer, no nothing. Absolutely nothing. So I learned more in 30 minutes sitting here. It wasn't fair. We showed up at that pre-development meeting and there was nothing given to us. Nothing. That's not how you should run a city. As to this use, the pictures will show that there is a major flooding problem where this crosses the road. You can drive out there, you can look at it. All the water for the surrounding 500 acres runs to this facility. The dirt that would be required and the damage to Mr. Horse's property would be extraordinary. Now, we've talked about the condemnation case. That is not your job today. I get that. But you are the arbiter. You are the people that should say that this is not appropriate. If you look from that wall to here, that's 75 feet. I walked it off before this meeting started. That's how far it is from Mr. King's front door. His house. No restrictions on height, nothing. His picnic table where he picnics is right on the property owner. This goes right up against the property. It goes right up against the paved road. Why? Because it's cheaper for them to do it. That's the reason, okay? That's not fair to Mr. Horse, who's owned this property for over 50-something years. You can't just come in there in an agricultural setting and take that away from them. I don't think it's fair. I don't think anyone on this commission would like it if it were their property. I ask you to put yourself in their position. I also think it's unfair
30 seconds.
fair that council had an unlimited time as an applicant and myself as the property owner is not given fair amount of time. Number one, the pre-meeting was not a pre-meeting. That is absolutely unforgivable. And if I were sitting in your position, I would table this matter and make them do it again, because you can't just spring this on them. They show up with all their executives here. They haven't talked to me, and I represent them in the condemnation case. We haven't looked for other alternatives, folks, and there are a lot of alternatives.
Thank you for your comments.
I'll hold my comments, but there's a lot more here, and I would ask that either you defer this matter or just outright reject it, because it's wrong.
Thank you very much. Moving to Rita Jones. And Ms. Jones, again, if you'll just say your name and address, and if you'd like a 30-second warning, please let me know.
My name is Rita Jones. I live at 5250 72nd Avenue Southeast, Noble, Oklahoma. Approximately 10 years ago, my husband, who's now deceased, and I bought our property for the peace and the quiet and the beauty of the country. I'm opposed to any condemnation or rezoning that will disturb that reality. I feel I have the right, as do my neighbors and anyone around, to preserve that beauty and that nature and why we bought the land. I don't want to sit on my patio and see huge metal poles and wires going everywhere. I feel I have the right not to be disturbed by that. I also don't want to hear the noise from the construction or the operation. I'm also concerned about possible health risks. I've lived in a town before where that was a reality of a friend of mine's property. I also don't want my property to be devalued. I'm 75 years old. I want that property to be worth what I need it to be worth when I have to sell it or when I pass it on to my children. And it will be devalued. I would not have bought it had this structure been there. So the next person won't either. And I hope that you will consider people like me when you decide whether or not to let this be forced onto our neighborhood. This type thing should not be forced onto any residential neighborhood. There are plenty of pieces of land where this kind of thing can be built. And then people can know if they want to buy or build in that area, but not have it forced onto us after we already have settled in our land and love our land. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Gary L. King. Just for sake of posterity, again, name, address, let me know if you'd like 30 seconds.
Yeah. Gary King, 5300 72nd Avenue. I'm the family that lives right next to this property that is about 75 feet from my house. And I think it's wrong, for one, to take a person's property against their will, and more so to build a structure like this next to an existing home where I've been there since '97 and worked very hard for my family to have a nice, quiet place to live. And I have watched that water. I've taken several pictures and videos of how that water runs off of that land, both from the west and from the north. And it congregates down there, runs across the street, and that is also in a Thunderbird watershed protected area. And the reason they don't want to build and plant any foliage around that is because they have a grid in that ground and that gravel, and they spray herbicides to keep that stuff from growing into that structure. And that is going to flow across the street into those ponds and into Thunderbird eventually. And it's not only going to devalue my property, it's going to devalue and disrupt our quality of life. It's basically in my front yard. And it is totally unacceptable for this kind of structure to be put beside my home or in this area, even for my neighbors. I'm the closest one, but these others can still see it. It's close enough where it's going to devalue everyone's property. And not just devalue it, I don't think I would ever be able to sell it when it comes time for me to sell it because of that structure being there. Because I would have not purchased it knowing it was there. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. John Crenshaw. Same thing, name, address, let me know if you'd like the warning.
John Crenshaw, 5100 72nd Avenue, Southeast Noble. I'm with my neighbors. I just worry about the devaluation of my land. I also have a big pond just running behind Gary that I'm worried about. So I'm concerned about that. Just like to have that taken into consideration for my family also. So thank you.
Thank you. Were there any other parties that wanted to make public comment that did not already do so? Okay, great. And if you will just state your name and address especially clearly since we don't have the form. And
Humphrey,
yeah.
6655 East Etowah. I have more questions than comments, if I may. The council here asked the applicant several questions. The first one was, how does this affect Norman, our constituents? This is a transmission company, if I understand, not distribution. They made that clear. They're not affecting Norman clients. So they're asking to become a profitable institution using eminent domain, using approval by the council, but they're not serving Norman residents direct. They're a transmission company transmitting this thousands of miles potentially away from the grid, from this area. So there's more questions why they did not directly address your question affirmatively. We're not doing distribution, we're doing transmission. There's no challenge questions here about the devaluation of the real estate. Some quick research said roughly 30% of the value will be devalued on the immediately adjacent properties. Research is formally out there. So now we are affecting Norman residents by the devaluation of property by putting a substation at this point. Again, there are no ecological or research that was presented to anyone, based on what the changes in runoff, changes in chemical attribution based on the requirements of the feds to protect electrical utilities. That's not been mentioned here, nor is it presented at any given time. So my question is why? Now, the next question is, if the council here does not approve the special use permit, I would expect, or I'm going to assume, and unless the council's directly here, I assume they're going to assume the city of Norman for permission. They've already gone through eminent domain, so they have the right to capture the property. Now, there's also a question here that will you wait for approval, wait for the settlements before you start building? Well, if I, layman, understand the law as eminent domain, they already own the property. They can use it immediately. The only question now is getting value reestablished to the previous property owner. Sorry, okay? But they can start immediately if we understand this correct. And I don't think they made that clear to anyone in the audience here. So there's some more questions here that they haven't answered directly. I don't want to say honestly. You haven't directly answered to present themselves to a property audience here. I yield the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other parties that care to make comment that we did not already have up? Okay. Seeing none, I'd move to Planning Commission discussion, and if there are any other questions by commissioners for either the applicant or staff.
I have a question to Western Farmers. Did you do environmental studies? Are those existing? What did you learn from those?
Travis, you want to? Primarily, it's focused on the stormwater diversion. There are environmental. There was some discussion about contaminating the ground. They have mitigation factors in place to, where if oil does release in a catastrophic, that would only happen in a catastrophic event. That if oil does release and runs off with water, that they have methods to capture that water, separate the oil, and let the water run out. But environmentally, it would be limited to the stormwater runoff. And that's why they're building that detention pond, which, as I understand, is not a common feature of these substations. That is a direct result of, this particular site.
To clarify, meaning because of all the water runoff, a detention facility is required?
The topography of this land, it calls for it. And so that was their way of mitigating any potential flood risk or water runoff risk that might occur.
Okay, thank you.
What's the height of the station? And if you possibly could equate that into a building, like stories for me, that would be super helpful.
I do not know the answer to the height question, but
the transmission line itself is going to be taller than the station, but the highest point in the station would be about 50 feet above ground. That would be a.
just for
Is it lower than the existing poles for point of reference?
Yes, just for he meant the lines that are already there.
Oh, okay.
It is lower than those poles.
And the station is 50 feet, and what is it, like 15 feet for a story?
Approximately 3 stories or so.
Yeah, okay, so if it was a building, it'd be approximately 3 stories is what we're kind of talking about, is that fair?
Yeah, but that 50-foot is a 2-inch piece of pipe you hardly won't see it in the air.
What's the majority, the hunk of the building, or the structure?
40 feet would be the highest large object.
So approximately like 2.5 stories, maybe?
I'm not sure how
I don't know. Trying to give something, frame of context for 40 stories for us. They're 10 each? Really? Okay, okay, great. And then, okay, thanks for that. And these might be city questions, but if you want an opportunity, answer them first before deferring. Is this property located in a WQPZ zone?
No, and Matt, if you'd like to discuss that, he handles the permitting.
I'm Matt Caves, VP of Legal and Regulatory Compliance. Our permitting process is, we, as a rural electric cooperative, not-for-profit, member-owned, OEC is one of our member owners, we do our financing through Rural Utility Services, which is a function of USDA, Department of Agriculture. With that, we have a process that we go through where we have to do a cultural study. That comment period ends next Monday, and then they move to RUS's environmental approval. They review the environmentals of the site, issue an approval or denial, and before we can do any work, turn any dirt, we have to have those approvals through RUS. As far as the stormwater, there's 2 avenues, whether it's the stormwater general construction permit through the DEQ, or if we fall within the City of Norman's small MS4, it may be permitted through the City of Norman's small MS4 stormwater construction permit. And we have to meet all the requirements of that permit. OKR 10 have the best management practices. We have inspection requirements, whether that is 24 hours from rainfall events, and then I think monthly, and then we have to keep that reporting as well. So we have to meet all those requirements. And your question to the WQP zone, that falls within the stormwater permitting.
Okay, so it is going to be in the WQPZ? Thank you, Todd. He's shaking his head no in the background, so no.
I do not believe so.
Okay, thank you. And could we pull up the aerial of the site, the zoomed in of the site, but the aerial view?
From the city?
Maybe, yeah. It was like the second slide for this item, maybe?
Yeah, let's go to this. Okay.
Thank you. What I'm wanting to see is context. We heard 100 feet or maybe 75 feet from the neighbor. Can we see the neighbor's property from this aerial? And can you point to this for us over here? Or where is this neighbor's property that's in question?
It is north, so up. Up and left. There's a structure there. I don't know if that's a home, but that is. That's a home.
Thank you. Okay, so that's one of the corners there, but we don't, in Mr. King's property in particular, can we see it on here from right now from the applicant's perspective?
Ground property or improved,
Improved. I'd like to see improvements.
The improvements are in the top left side there.
Okay.
I believe, based on comment from the crowd,
Okay.
that is a garage on that, what you see up there on the, directly above the left red corner.
And maybe like a pool or a water
Yeah.
feature for cattle or something, yeah. Could we also then switch over to the site plan one more time so I can just see that in context with that fresh in my mind? Also, as just a suggestion for the city council meeting, just maybe an overlay, if possible, of like maybe an aerial that we can see just a little bit more out without seeing 98 acres. It's very hard to get context of a full 98.
The council presentation will be more.
Thank you. And maybe like an overlay possibly, I would love that. So just as a suggestion for council. So we've got the majority of our structure is kind of centrally located within that site. Okay. Thank you. I wanted to get some perspective on that. Okay, any other questions for applicants?
Just one.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I didn't ask this directly earlier. This is kind of a question with a comment. Is there a representative of OEC or OG&E here? And if, in related question, will this service area be OEC or OG&E?
OEC is a member of Western Farmers. OG&E is not a member of Western Farmers. So OG&E is not involved in this whatsoever. It is just OEC is a member owner of Western Farmers. Service area, it will serve primarily OEC because they're a member of Western Farmers.
And is there a representative?
I do not. There is no OEC representative here. I do not know the boundary of OG&E and OEC. Apparently, it is in OG&E territory, but it will be serving OEC because of their affiliation with Western Farmers.
Well, and we can continue questions, but this is just related to this question. My comment is I have concerns that there's not a representative from OEC in the room to answer some of these questions about service area. I understand now. I appreciated the distinction between transmission versus distribution service. That was new to me, but without a representative from OEC, it's hard for me to tell what's appropriate as a use relative to what service area is and what future demand is. Things like that. So. Happy to, if there's any other comments that could be made on that, that'd be great.
So, you can build infrastructure in anybody's service territory. There's no rules against that. OG&E can build in OEC service territories. OEC can build in OG&E infrastructure. Now, you can't necessarily serve load in somebody else's service territory. Does that help?
It does. It does for context. Some of the questions I had earlier during the applicant presentation, questions there, was related to who exactly are we trying to serve here? The comment was made, we're nearly at capacity. Well, what is that? What does that mean? Are we at capacity or are we nearly at capacity? If we're nearly at capacity, what is the percentage that we have to go? What's the runway? Is that 5 years? Is that 10 years? What growth are we anticipating? Because if we don't know the growth area, how are we to judge what future growth may look like relative to need for a substation on this particular site at this moment in time? So that's where I'm having trouble, and that's where OEC may be able to answer that question. I don't know, so.
So the load on the existing substations is highly dependent on temperature. When we had, was it 2021, when we had that real cold snap, everybody's electric use went through the roof. And we actually, one of the adjacent substations overloaded. It exceeded its capacity. Luckily, in the wintertime, it's not overly critical because it's so cold that, the cold helps dissipate the heat of the transformer. But we have overloaded a transformer based on just existing load.
We saw some pictures of transmission lines. Do the transmission lines cross this particular location from one pole to another?
They do. It runs through this site, and that's precisely why this site was selected, is so they could tie into those existing lines. I can pull up that. There's a photo that shows them from the road. Might be easier if you did it. This is there. So that is the border between the King property and Western Farmers. And so the poles are on the Horse and Western Farmers portions, and it looks like there are some that cross, that run along the road, but those might be telephone lines, but the electrical lines are the tall ones you see there.
To Mr. King's concerns about the location of this property and the transformers, is it possible that the transformers and and the structure supporting it could be located in a corner of this property, should this go through, to further maybe mitigate some of his concerns about,
Move the structure south down or
just away from his property as far as possible and still make it functional?
It's possible we could maybe go south a little bit, but we still have to have access around the entire property with our equipment. So it's best if we center the substation in the center of the property. That gives us the most access around it.
Thank you.
Do you not have access through that gate all along those lines currently?
we
So
can.
if you moved laterally, you would still have the same access?
Except for this access, the equipment that needs to go on a substation is a lot larger than the equipment that goes down a transmission line. So we need more access around the substation.
So I think if the substation itself was moved within the bounds of the current property, if you moved it south, there would not be enough room on the south side, I believe is what he's saying, if that goes to your question.
One other quick question. And it just came to me, do landowners who have transmission lines on their property get any financial benefit from their presence, like, say, someone who leased space for a windmill? Is there any benefit to the landowner when there are transmission lines crossing their property?
Transmission lines, no, it is not like a lease. The Horses will be paid just compensation that will be either reached by agreement or by the court's determination for that part. So the taking is not just a taking, it is a exchange of judicially determined compensation for that land. So that was another point I wanted to emphasize. But yet, no, the transmission lines do not generate revenue for landowners.
I had an additional question. There was a comment made earlier that there were potentially up to 8 sites that were reviewed, and an offer was made on another site. Why this site versus another site? And to kind of related to that question, given the proximity to someone's home, were there other sites that were more suitable that may have not been as close to, or as suitable or close to as suitable for a substation that were not this close proximity to another person's home?
Proximity to 72nd is very important just for ease of access or ability to access. Parcels further along the lines, you have to go to the next road. And so I was not privy to the involvement or the negotiations Western Farmers had with other landowners.
So we first looked on 60th, which there's actually more houses over there. And OG&E has distribution line on 60th. That prevented OEC from building a distribution line. This spot, we don't have to build any new transmission line, where on 60th, we would have likely had to build transmission line along with the substation.
Is there the ability to move further out? I mean, I know you said you had to hop another road, but 84th, did you all look at potential that direction, or was that not the capacity that you need to meet when you move further east?
So this location was picked because distribution lines from the 2 adjacent substations come together here. So that was the best place to tie them together.
I have a follow-up. With you mentioning 60th and 72nd, is this potential turnpike construction driven, the location?
No, we started this process well before OTA put out their maps. So this has nothing to do with the turnpike.
So what was the date that you guys assigned a site selection committee?
The board authorized pursuit of sites January of this year, but the plans to enhance capacity in this area have been going on much longer than just January of this year.
Okay, what was the date of that meeting?
January the 17th.
Okay.
And that was the board's authorization and essentially declaration of public necessity, which is a prerequisite to starting the eminent domain action.
So the site selection, though, was well after the maps came out of OTA, even though somewhere in the region was discussed before the maps.
Specific site, yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I do have two follow-up points that aren't questions. There might be other questions. I did a very untechnical measuring with my pen on a site map, and it looked like approximately, to clarify the difference of 75 and 100 feet, it was about 75 feet to the property line, and it would probably be close to 100 feet from the actual building. Also from an aerial, that garage we saw was attached to Mr. King's home too, just for question. It wasn't an outbuilding. It does look like it was maybe technically an attached outbuilding, but it was all part of his home that we couldn't see quite on that map. Is that fair about in the 7,500 feet discrepancies we heard?
The staff report says 107 feet, so that's as accurate as I know.
Okay, great. And this was not at a section line. It looks like it's at a quarter section line, and that comes up because of statutory road rights, so I just wanted to mention that too. Any other questions for the applicant or staff that we didn't already address? Okay, thank you very much. Seeing none, we would move to Planning Commission discussion at this point. Any discussion by commissioners?
I made similar comments earlier, but I know that I asked a question about capacity, and it was reference to the 2021 that was an unprecedented event when it was negative 50 outside. And my concern is that I just feel like we don't have enough information to make a sound decision as to whether there is a need for this at this point in time, or if this is anticipating growth that is not yet there. And I know that our purview is under the Norman 2025 land use plan, but we're undergoing a major comp plan update that may or may not affect how that growth looks in this area. And so hearing the timeline for the condemnation of, potentially at minimum a year up to 3 years or more, that's where I asked the question earlier, what's the hurry here? I understand that there's time and money that goes into a condemnation process that, they want to have assurance that they're going to have rezoning to continue this process, but it also sounds like a predetermined outcome with the condemnation. And so my inclination is that, and we don't have to have agreement here, but my inclination is that I would be interested in tabling this to hear more from representatives with OEC, to hear about current capacity needs, what anticipated future growth looks like, where this growth is anticipated, where this specific service lines are going to be serving, because we didn't get that answer. And we heard that it may serve a little bit of Norman, may serve areas outside of Norman, but it all feels very squishy without that type of information from what it sounds like is the distribution company. And so it just seems premature, and not to point to a comment that you made, but when I hear that the city council presentation will be much more robust. There's always changes between presentation from here to there, but that's our job, is to hear a robust presentation of what is being included in this project, and the details and the numbers, and why this is the necessary site to build this type of project, and I don't think we heard it tonight. Either lean to a table or, given the lack of information, not supporting the site at this time.
I have those exact same sentiments for the exact same reasons. I feel like we don't have enough information on the need for the rezoning. And so I am in agreement that either a tabling, and not necessarily for next month, but maybe 3 to 6 months down the road, or non-approval.
I just want to reiterate that my appreciation for helping us understand the condemnation action, and that is not part of my decision-making, that we are here for a planning and zoning decision. But thank you, everyone, for helping us with that understanding of the process. I also just appreciate the need for these services and having capacity that is served. I think I had a question right out the gate, the same as Commissioner Brewer had, of who's getting served. It's, if this proximity, if this was on 60th, this would potentially have been Noble versus Norman. So I think some of these questions as relates to why this is a Norman planning special use versus a Noble special use or their equivalent are still kind of outstanding, and I appreciate that he has voiced those concerns on there. I am still very uncomfortable with the proximity to Mr. King's home. Then this is by no failing of the applicant's presentation, but this, just with the amount of height that this is in this area and being so close to this house, there is the whole concept of condemnation, and why these services are needed is that they are needed for the greater good. But it is easy to miss the people that are being most directly impacted in that. We have talked about that a lot with stormwater, and I appreciate that this had robust stormwater engineering. There were many good things about this, but I feel uncomfortable at this point with what I know today and the proximity to Mr. King's home in particular, seeing that on there. So I want to voice that. And Ms. Hudson also has a comment.
I'm sorry, I just want to have clarification before you guys do make a motion. When you say table, I would like to get a legal interpretation on this question of table versus postpone before you guys decide to make a motion.
Or a clarification by commissioners, but what their intent is with that comment.
My intent with the comment is postponement.
Same.
Thank you.
Could you go ahead and explain what a postponement would be, what that would entail?
So typically at this level, postponements are typically they're a prerogative of the applicant. If the applicant wishes for you to make a decision, that's typically what's honored. You are the body, you make the decision, but that's how it's gone. And when a postponement is done, it's to a date certain. Tabling is essentially killing a matter, and I hear that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about getting more information. So if that's where, especially in discussion with the applicant, how long it would take to get the information that you feel you need, that would be the amount of time that would be discussed. But it would need to be to a date certain so that we can place it on that agenda and that the public has notice of when that date's going to be. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and if it's declined, it's just declined, correct?
Right, this is a recommendatory body. It's going to pass on for decision to city council one way or another. But if you do feel you need additional information and that a postponement would benefit and the applicant has more information to bring, that has happened.
Okay, because you're good. You're good, perfect. Because I think one of the things that I'd like to see is I'd like to see how this is going to look right next to to this family's home. Unfortunately for you, you're second to the request. We got to see Nextera's very extensive and very large distribution or whatever it's called here. We got to see that be built, and I would have probably preferred to have an eye view level on what it would look like, because it was nothing like what I thought. And I think, if anything, the individuals around this need to see what it's going to look like, and whether that's stops it or not, they need to understand what it's going to look like, and this is going to be in their front yard. And to me, that's a good neighbor. I mean, I'd like to know what a 4-story pole is going to look like next to my house, and just so I can make some determinations. But I mean, to me, that's just being a good neighbor. So that would be my thoughts.
Yeah, and a follow-up to that, I absolutely understand that there's federal regulation that you cannot have certain types of landscaping, buffering, vegetation, things like that. But it does seem that there is something you can do here, and to some extent. And I don't know what that is. I don't know what regulation is, but as similar to Commissioner McDaniel's comments, what are those options, and what is the applicant willing to do, and what does that visually look like? How does that change the buffer? How does that change the feel? How does it change the sound? Any concerns that are, and if there are absolutely no options on the table, then I think that needs to be, and if that's what it is, and there's no leeway there, then we need to know that. But if it's, if there are options, I think that I don't want to speak for the whole commission, but I do think that most of us would probably feel that some level of mitigation, if possible, would need to be a consideration here.
I would just add that for the applicant, it's probably atypical to request the kind of presentation that you've heard us ask for. However, with the proximity to that home, what we are asking is for consistency with any other project that is brought before us by an applicant, where they've got those detailed images, where we can see, and those that are going to be neighboring it can see exactly, okay, from Mr. King's property, this is what it's going to look like. And here's the height of the structure compared to the height of his rooftop, his roof line. That's consistent with what other applicants bring us, whether it's a storage facility going in right on the other side of a neighborhood, or if it's a special use of putting in an outbuilding with a circle drive. So we hear all sorts of things, but especially when there are concerns by those that neighbor so closely, that's going to do a lot to show good faith for who will be your neighbor if you do build there, and due diligence, and also help us make a decision with more information rather than less, if that makes sense. All right, we've been looking on Google Maps to try to get a better aerial view.
Okay, at this point, is there any other discussion, or I would take a motion by a commissioner?
Well, just to clarify, just to Beth's comments, is there interest in postponement from the applicant? If not, then I'd make a motion, but I just want to make sure. That's the question. No interest. Okay. So I'd make a motion.
Just as a point of order, if we're not making a motion for postponement, we make it a motion to approve and then either vote yes or no on the approval by standard rather than making motions to reject. Is just a reminder on that too.
Sure. I would make a motion to approve or reject. Is that right?
Second.
Approve, sorry.
And a vote? Microphone reminder.
Commissioner Brewer,
No.
Commissioner McDaniel,
No.
Commissioner McCowan,
No.
Commissioner Byrd,
No.
Commissioner McClure,
No?
Commissioner Griffith,
No.
and Commissioner Kendall.
No.
And the motion fails 7-0.
Moving to our next non-consent item, item number 4, consideration of adoption, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance O-2425-10, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, adding section 36-568, restrictions on tobacco and e-cigarette retailers, to chapter 36 zoning ordinance, and amending sections 36-521 RO Residence Office District, 36-524 C1 Local Commercial District, 36-526 TC Tourist Commercial District, 36-527 CR Rural Commercial District, and 36-560 special uses to Chapter 36 zoning ordinance of the Code of the City of Norman to establish restrictions on tobacco and e-cigarette retailers and providing for the severability thereof. And I will take the staff presentation, also Tourist Commercial District, yeah. It's just one moment, we're gonna just close the door for sound. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Jason Olson, Director of Parks and Recreation, presenting on behalf of the city. The City of Norman is working, or the City of Norman Parks and Recreation Department is working with the Tobacco Settlement Endowment Trust on a couple of grants. Those grants would go towards fulfilling part of Reeves Park Master Plan, which is to build a miracle field or a fully accessible baseball field out at Reeves Park. To do that, or part of that, we would like to file for a grant through TSET. A portion of that is to become a gold certified city, which we would need to have a zoning ordinance that would restrict the sale of tobacco products within 300 feet of a school, playground, or a dwelling that has the majority use of those 21 or under. So my presentation was super short. Love to answer any questions about it. I think it's pretty easy on our part, and love to help you understand if you need some more understanding.
Thank you. Moving to commission questions for staff, and I actually had one. So are you aware of any conflicting businesses currently? And if so, would those be grandfathered with this ordinance?
Yes, so I'm sure that there are several businesses. We haven't looked them up, but there is a grandfather clause that goes along with that. So any businesses that are currently within a 300-foot area of a school or a playground or a establishment that is majorly used by 21 and under would be grandfathered into this.
Thank you. Any other questions by commission for staff? Okay, seeing none, I would open to audience comments if there are any.
I have a comment. Oh. Thank you for being the first person to speak up in 2 years at these meetings.
Oh, thanks.
Nice and clear, nice and loud, like an umpire.
Oh, yeah, my sinuses are clear now, so I'm glad it could. And it's good to see you, Commissioner McClure. After we had a lot of experience going back to Junior Jammers days and refereeing some basketball with us as well.
Great. Any other planning commission discussion? Seeing none, I would take a motion and a reminder for microphones
I make a motion to approve.
I second.
and a vote.
Commissioner Brewer,
Yes.
Commissioner McDaniel,
Yes.
Commissioner McCowan,
Yes.
Commissioner Byrd,
Yes.
Commissioner McClure,
Yes.
Commissioner Griffith,
Yes.
and Commissioner Kendall.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Moving to our next non-consent item, number 5, consideration of adoption, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance O-242517, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, amending Chapter 36, Article V, zoning, Section 36-535, Historic District Commission requirement, amending the application requirements for certificate of appropriateness, edits for consistency or corrective purposes, and allow Historic Preservation Officer to grant the time extension for certificate of appropriateness and providing for the severability thereof. And I'll take the staff presentation.
Thank you. Do I have to get really close to hear? I can't hear myself. Okay.
Apparently, we need you to speak up.
Okay, then I will. Project. Okay, Anna E. Starr, a Historic Preservation Officer for the City of Norman. I'm bringing forward these amendments to provide a cleaner certificate of appropriateness application process. The amendments will align the Historic District Ordinance with other planning processes in our department. And there, I provided an annotated ordinance in your agenda packet. Section 36535G3, this will remove the list of application requirements from that section and make a reference to the section where they're all consolidated in one spot. It also provides a deadline for Historic District Commission feedbacks. Right now, they are allowed to request a feedback, but there's no deadline. This sets one, and then we did a little bit of modifying wording for clarity. In section 36535G9A, we removed the 24 calendar days from that section, and we are now going to have the deadline be the same as the other planning processes, which is the first business day of the month. And again, modified a little bit of wording for clarity. Remove the word working from in front of days. This will align the notification process for the Historic District Commission with other planning notification processes. And finally, in 36535G9B9, a deadline for submission of a COA amendment request was added. Also, this is the section that will grant me, the Historic Preservation Officer, the ability to grant 6-month extensions to approved certificate of appropriateness. So this will relieve the applicants from having to come back through a lengthy process to get a project reapproved that has been already approved. And I think that's it. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions by commission for staff?
No, I would just like to thank you for giving us the red line version because that made it a lot easier.
Oh,
So
okay,
Thank you very
thank you.
much for that.
Or Beth, yeah. I would just, would be interested in any thoughts by Commissioner Brewer, who previously served on the Historic Commission, as to the benefits of this.
Yeah, I think it's great. No, I think it just cleans up the process. I think it can be a very confusing process at times for those who are not engaged at a professional level. These are homeowners who are just coming to the table, who are wanting to make additions to their home, or say additions, that's what we're doing right now, or just small modifications, and this just streamlines it, which is what it should be. So that's great.
Excellent. Yeah, happy to hear that. And also, I think we talk about this at Planning Commission pretty regularly, that we want to allow, we understand time delays happen and these things, and being flexible with working with people. And I think we have definitely seen supply chain shortages and other things, and 60 days is a very reasonable and very likely possibility. So adding a little bit less administrative burden, I think, is wonderful. So if there's any other Planning Commission questions or discussion or public comment, seeing none, I would take a motion.
Move to approve.
Second that.
And a vote.
Commissioner Brewer,
Yes.
Commissioner McDaniel,
Yes.
Commissioner McCowan,
Yes.
Commissioner Byrd,
Yes.
Commissioner McClure,
Yes.
Commissioner Griffith,
Yes.
and Commissioner Kendall.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. We are moving to miscellaneous discussion. Does staff have any information for the commission?
We do. Hello, Laura Hoggett with the Planning Department. I am tall today. Is this loud enough? We good? Okay. I would like to share with you our AIM open houses. Yay. So our first one will be at the YFAC on December 10th from 6:30 to 8. And the next option, it will be here in this room, December 11th from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. We will be showing the progress we've made thus far in AIM. We should have our land use map up, our character area maps. They are still drafts, so please come give your comments, give us your feedback. We've made a lot of good progress so far, and we're excited to see what the community thinks. So, and as always, you can go to aimnorman.com for more information.
Thank you.
I did have a question. Well, I first want to thank staff for everything they've put into this process. I mean, I know that it's been extremely extensive, and I've been hearing updates from all kinds of people in the community about this and that and, you know, what's going on. And so I'm glad that we're nearing the finish line when it's really hard to get there. So thank you. But I was curious about what, you know, in the event that there's a draft, what is the process from there? Does that come through Planning Commission? What?
Yes.
Yeah.
So after the public meetings, the steering committee will decide which comments they want to incorporate and which they feel are not best incorporated. Then they will vote to send it forward to you guys. And we would like to have a special meeting. We'll give you as much notice as we can, but we think that deserves its own meeting because there's the land use plan plus 6 other plans. So it's a big thing for you guys to check out. So we're hoping to give you some advance notice so you can read most of it, hopefully. And then you guys will make a recommendation to council. And Jane has a follow-up.
Yeah, go ahead.
And so we don't have the dates yet, as Laura said, but also, like she said, this is going to be a large undertaking, but we're planning to have like parks at a council conference and then possibly, and I don't know what the order is yet, but transportation and stormwater at council conference. So when we do finally get to council and to you, it will have been out there in public meetings, so it won't be fresh at this very first meeting for you guys. So we'll get those dates set and we'll get them out to everybody. We were going to meet, Assistant City Manager Shannon Stevens is going to set a meeting next week, and we'll sit down and we'll get all those dates lined out and we'll get everything out to everybody so you'll have it on your calendars.
I also wanted to say thank you. I know this has been a very labor-intensive, time-consuming process. So thank you to you and staff for all that you've been doing. Just a request, if you could send us those dates. I know I can go to aimnorman.com, but if you could please send us those dates and times and locations, that would be great as a reminder, so I don't forget to go to aimnorman.com. Okay. Thank you.
Are the city council conferences going to be exclusive for city council, or would that be something that potentially planning commission could join for, or?
You could join for it. We would just need to know if there's going to be a quorum of you there so we could post it as a meeting.
Okay. That might be also good dates to kind of be aware of.
Yeah, joint session would be good. And we've also talked about there's plans eventually, once it's adopted or pretty close to adoption, to have like a training session of how to use it, how you guys would
Like a study
compare
session?
projects to it.
Yeah.
With the consultant and staff to kind of make sure we all are on the same page moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other planning commission discussion? Not, I'll declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you.
That's okay. It's all good.